All right. I'm gonna share screen. Cool. So for Nate, can you see the tab right now?
Yeah.
Cool. So yeah, for today's lecture, we're gonna be doing a little bit more of an open discussion based on the projects that we kind of visited last lecture. And we're just gonna kind of be going over some of the limitations of the technology and why you should always kind of be skeptical and kind of weigh out whether whether a project is a good block makes for a good blockchain use case or not. Um, so yeah, David, does that sound good?
That sounds great. And then what I'll do is, as the questions come in, if you don't mind, I might interrupt you now and then, or we can just do everything at a time when it's a logical pause for you. But yeah, I'll keep the questions coming.
Yeah, I think that would be best. Great. So yeah, I guess
Before we start, why don't you guys just say a word or two? There we go. Oh my, that looks terrible. Why don't you just say a thing or two about the presentations and what you guys would like to see?
Of course. So just as a reminder, the presentations will be on Friday, and each group will have less than 1 minute, so 60 seconds to present on and talk about their project. And the goal of this is to simulate an elevator pitch. So what that means, it's a very short, compact, and straight to the point presentation and overview of what your project is, what you're hoping to do with it, and like a little bit of the inner workings. And so the goal is, imagine you meet someone. I mean, just the way I've been told to give elevator pitches is, imagine you only have a few seconds to interact with someone, and you have to distill the essence or the thesis of your project down to a few sentences. That's exactly what this presentation is, because there are a lot of situations in the world of like venture capital or of investors, or even just in general, just talking to friends and family, where you would need to explain your product in a few seconds. And so that's what we're hoping that you'll be able to practice and develop with this exercise. So on Friday itself, it'll be either just a verbal 60-second overview of what your project is, what your group is working on. You can also include some kind of a graphic if you'd like, but that's purely optional. And so it's whatever you're most comfortable with. If you think that it would help your presentation, then you can definitely have a picture or two, or maybe but ideally, let's leave it to one slide. So just like it's one graphic or image. And then, but yeah, and then mostly rely upon the verbal components to get the points across about what your project will hope to achieve. Okay. Do we have any questions about that?
I can hear a strange noise in the background, like a metallic noise. Maybe it's somebody's.
I think that's just someone's. I just muted the that person.
Thank you. Yeah, it sounded like we were inside a submarine. Just a combination of water and metal. So
okay. Great. So let's kick it off. I think the pretty much the first thing I wanted to talk about was copyright arbitration, or the lack thereof, and also the lack of enforcement for copyrights on chain. So I think for a lot of these projects, the reason that, for example, when we visited this on Friday, I was talking about how a lot of these platforms you actually have to apply to, and they are kind of like gating who can actually come on and put an NFT on their platform, right? Of course, everybody can mint an NFT at any time. They don't really need permission, but for them to gain distribution through these kind of like curated channels of NFTs, you have to be approved on these platforms. I think the reason is because currently there's no good solution for copyright arbitration. And what that really means is that Web3 music, or just I guess Web3 in general in terms of Web3 and media, is kind of a wild west of media, just because anybody at any time could upload anything they want. And so on places like OpenSea or Rarible, or Mint Songs, which closed down like I think probably like 7 to 8 months ago, all of these places basically don't really care about copyrights right now. And so what that makes them is kind of, imagine if you had Napster or like Pirate Bay, where you have these peer-to-peer file sharing networks, but then with a little like donation form, or just a way to like pay for something. And so like everyone on here, like if we went to OpenSea right now, you can kind of find like, let's pick an artist. I'm gonna pick like, I'm just gonna pick Justin Bieber, right? So if we go on here, as you can see, somebody uploaded, and this is totally spontaneous, just to show you guys that copyrights exist so sparingly. Somebody literally uploaded his entire album, right? And we can literally go through and like stream all of this for free without paying for a single thing. We basically don't really know who posted this. It's pretty anonymous. And yeah, not really saying. What's up, Nate?
Well, yeah, one point I wanted to add on too is that, I mean, as we mentioned, kind of linking back to addresses. I mean, you have your public key, which is your username, your externally facing the persona, and then you have your private key, which is your internal one. So yeah, the big link here for why it's really difficult to track any potential copyright infringement is that your address has its own identity, in the sense that everyone in the network knows who an address is, but that isn't linked back to your personal identity. So people can act with, pretty freely if they want to upload entire albums from artists, and they can do so without many repercussions. So that's why also, that's why this happens so much on, as we see right here with this album.
Yeah. Cool. So that's basically kind of the first thing I wanted to talk about.
Sorry,
the ideas.
there's one more noisy. Someone has their microphone open. Now it sounds like somebody's just taking a horse for a ride or something. That's great. Now it's quiet.
Okay, great. Yeah. So some of the ideas of solving copyright arbitration have been more traditional ideas of basically kind of leveraging AI as a technology to catch copyrights. So this is something that YouTube does like fairly well. A lot of people think it's like a little too strict. Like, let's say you're a vlogger and you walk through you're walking down the street and some song plays for like 2 seconds at while you're walking from some store. YouTube will literally catch that and like flag you for copyright, right? So their algorithm works pretty well for the most part. And so there's been a lot of talk of like, hey, once we can actually grow this space enough to have enough media and participation, it might be worth it to come up with something similar. Another idea we that we had at music was, hey, what if we leverage this power of kind of like incentive design and incentive mechanisms to incentivize the flagging of copyrights on the platform. Obviously, there's much to be kind of discovered and figured out there. Just because if you have an incentive for flagging copyrights, you don't want people to just randomly flag content as copyright infringement when it's not. But yeah, the idea is let the people bring it to your attention. And so you have kind of like less content to decide between and then manually do it. But that's kind of like the first limitation in this space, I would say. And that's why these more curated marketplaces really exist in the landscape right now, that aren't as like permissionless or open to everybody as you would think. So yeah, is there any questions about that?
I've got here, hold on a second. That's a bit better. Okay. Can you name any successful Web3 projects in general? Please do not include projects that just sell NFTs or startups that will be developed in the future. And how would you define success? So if we're not just selling NFTs and it's not just a cool idea, what are some other criteria for possible success?
Okay. So by like Web3 projects, then do you mean more of like an artist project or like collection?
No, I think more just ways to improve the industry. Because you've spoken about copyright arbitration. So if we're not just looking at the work of one artist, but maybe even a collection of artists or a label that is together improving some of the problems with copyright. Have you seen anything? Or does this still require a lot of work?
I guess it still requires a lot of work. There isn't really one project that has prioritized this. I do know of this DAO that is basically trying to leverage. Let's just see if we can find it real quick.
Mm-hmm.
They're trying to leverage the Creative Commons license. I think it's called CC0. This is the CoinDesk article about them. Okay.
What's the URL? CC0. I've got the merch. I'm looking for the actual. Maybe IO. No.
Is it cc0.io?
It is.
Oh, I thought
I'll find it. You talk about it and I'll find it.
Yeah, but basically this is kind of a new kind of creative license that they're trying to basically leverage for this for NFTs for this space. And so you can see here that like for a Creative Commons license, it'll allow, so in contrast to Creative Commons license, it'll allow copyright holders to choose from a range of permissions while retaining their copyright. Basically, let's see, it says it has the choice to opt out of copyright and database protection with a no rights reserved alternative to our licenses. So I kind of know about this. I'm a little bit more unfamiliar with the legal implications of like different creative licenses. It does sound that basically CC0 is allowing creators to waive all copyrights and related rights to the fullest extent allowed by the law in general. So I guess it might be kind of just like a surrender to enforcement from a system when you're uploading an NFT. And that could make sense considering that a lot of rules are broken when you as an artist like decide to upload an NFT. For example, like usually there's kind of some streaming fee or streaming royalty that should be enforced by platforms like legally. And when you upload an NFT, it's like OpenSea or all of these platforms, like you're not going to get streaming fees, obviously. So you kind of surrender your right to that. Also by uploading it, like with that, you're also giving up like free access to your content. And then yeah, I think yeah, that's all I gotta say about that. So you asked about successful projects that are actually like trying to tackle like copyright arbitration enforcement, and there isn't many that I know of in the space yet. So yeah.
One other reason for that as well is that, I mean, if you imagine something like, I'm not sure if this app exists like worldwide, but we have the app Shazam. And what this does is it can track a song pretty quickly, and it does so pretty effectively. And what it does though is to be able to match a song, like auditory input to a phone to the song title itself, is it requires a library or just an overall knowledge base of a bunch of songs listed, and then from there it can compare two audio files essentially to identify the song. A reason why this is trickier if to be done in Web3 is that it requires like this abundance of information to be available on chain a lot of the times. And so, I mean, it could be accessed off chain and it could reference like an off chain storage base, but finding a way to link like this library with a Web3 alternative or a method of working with this data and being able to compare these audio files isn't something that really has been approached and that's successful so far. And so if you think of YouTube, for example, which if it identifies some potential copyrighted audio, it'll completely just cut that audio segment out until the copyright section ended. And so that's why there is still a bit of like some progress that needs to be made to like for some kind of solution like this to be implemented, to have like copyright infringement monitoring on the same level as it is in Web 2.
Yeah. And when it comes to copyright, there's another very brief and probably important question, which is it possible for us to talk about authorship in Web3 without creating an NFT?
So is it possible to talk about authorship without creating an NFT?
Mm-hmm.
So do you mean kind of like basically putting up your work in a different way rather than minting an NFT?
Yeah. Or is the NFT the way to build a copyright on the blockchain? It's sort of the primary building block.
I don't think there is really a standardized way or implementation of kind of putting up a copyright on the blockchain right now. And yeah, I guess the reason for that is probably because everything that happens in the digital world is very hard to enforce, and especially something on a network is very hard to enforce, as there's no government like dictating the network. That's kind of one of like the first principles of what makes blockchain. Like basically you need to abide, you need a central authority to come in and enforce these things. And different rules are going to exist in different physical like locations. And so like when you're on a network on the internet, it's very hard for enforcement to happen like that. However, how enforcement usually does happen or can happen is anytime you need something that would usually be done by a central authority, you kind of can leverage a decentralized autonomous organization to basically vote on behalf of this stuff. And so a possible solution is like, what if we had a system where, you know, your DAO can vote on behalf of maybe like copyright arbitration or stuff of that sort. So in terms of putting up your copyrights like on chain, there isn't really a standardized way of doing it, nor is there like a single project that I can point out right now that's super popular that basically everyone is using. I think it's a part of a space that's still being explored. I do, however, want to showcase Mirror.xyz, which is another way that you can put up your work. So basically it lets you put up like some sort of article and publish it, or a crowdfunding campaign, and then people can come in and crowdfund. I think one of the things you can do here is, instead of mint an NFT, I believe that you can just raise through your own kind of like token for a crowdfund. But yeah.
Yeah, something else I'd like to point out on when you're done talking about Mirror. Like, so I've something else that can push the limits of the thinking for how we can think about Web3 projects. So, I mean, maybe Mo, let me know when you're all done with Mirror. And I'll talk to the next point.
Yeah. Go for it. I'm just gonna connect here just to show an example of like what a crowdfunding campaign looks like.
Okay. I'll go for that, and then I'll screen share after.
Yeah. All right, great.
All right, so right now Mo's connecting his wallet. A lot of these Web3 apps have Chrome or browser extensions that are required to be able to interact with a Web3 app in the full capacity.
Great. I honestly so they don't have a search. It's really awkward. All right, let me pull up an example of an artist. Daniel Allen. All right, so this artist is pretty well known in the Web3 music space, and what he's been able to do is leverage a mirror. I guess this is not the actual campaign. I want to show you guys the actual campaign. This might be it. Yeah. So he was able to leverage a Mirror.xyz fundraising campaign to basically share his story, his journey in crypto, and then kind of like tell people what he wants to utilize the funds for, which is this project called Overstimulated, which is like an album that he wanted to work out. And he also wanted to tokenize kind of ownership of royalty rights to the project, and then basically handle the conversion as well as like dispersion, distribution of funds to the people who own like half of his royalty rights off his project. And so what he basically did was, instead of going to a label, he instead leveraged this to raise money in exchange for like half of the royalty rights to his entire album. And so he was able to raise $80,000 here, or 49.3 ETH. His original funding goal was only 20 ETH, but he surpassed it by almost double that. And you can see that he gave the top backers, just as like a gift, I guess, these little like NFT tokens. So the top backer put in 5.2 ETH. And you can see it's just like a little podium of tokens, similar to something you would see on Kickstarter, really. The only difference here is he's actually sharing his royalty rights. And then over here, you can see everyone who invested in him. And the reason this isn't an NFT is he basically just created these tokens which are Overstim tokens. And so you can see that like for this 5.21 ETH, this guy owns 5% of the royalty rights to this album. And he also owns 5,214 of Overstim tokens. So yeah, I guess that's like a way that you could monetize your work, or like sell your royalty rights without necessarily minting an NFT.
Yeah, and then something else I wanted to add on to this as well is there's been, I mean, we've seen a lot of success with this with either video games or even an example that comes to mind is Robinhood. It's the trading platform. And so what they'll do is they'll find ways to kind of appeal to like dopamine sensors in the brain to create like actions or effects that are appealing to the user. And so as we see in video games, there might be an action or a set of actions that maybe release some dopamine and make, I mean, for lack of better words, make someone feel good. And so creating and replicating these emotions may be at the forefront of the user's mind. And so these can all be thought of as gamified components of Web3, of games, whatever they may be. And so even something like the podium there, or in Robinhood, for example, every time, I mean, they actually banned this because of this exact reason, but in Robinhood, which is the stock trading platform online, it's fully mobile, or for the most part, it's mobilely originated. Every time someone would trade a stock, there would be a screen that would flash some confetti and then say something like congrats on trading the stock or buying the stock. And so this would release some like pleasure in everyone's brains and then encourage them to trade more. And so then regulatory parties realized that this was potentially a conflict of interest for those who were going to trade stocks, and it gamified the entire stock and options platform. And so as you can see, this is something that can also be used to one's advantage in a platform like, or in a NFT or music trading platform as well. And then the other thing I wanted to mention was like to push the limits of how we see like Web3 applications being used. There was one that came to mind right here is actually a Berkeley-based startup called Relentlo. And so what they do here is they look at and try to find ways to natively create in-game advertising. And so the way they do this is a lot of times when you're playing a mobile game, you might receive, like, or at least on YouTube, you might receive an ad at the beginning of a video, or you might have a pop-up ad that comes up part of the way through a game. And so what this does is finds a way to kind of incorporate advertisements into the backgrounds of advertisements and of real life. And so this is something that I went to on Christmas Eve, but this is a really cool revelation, a really cool breakthrough in this company, because they worked with Mariah Carey to create a live Winter Wonderland presentation or like concert in Roblox, which I know, at least in the US, is a very popular game. And so what they did is they created, on one of the stages, they had a live like, concert by Mariah Carey that was sponsored by EOS. And the way they do this, let's see if there are any screenshots in here. I don't think there are, unfortunately, but they incorporated small items throughout the game that provided more value in the game. For example, because EOS is a lip balm or a chapstick brand. Yeah, lip balm and skincare. And so they had little EOS like capsules or power-ups that would allow players to, let's say, jump higher or move faster in the game when they went and when they used these items. And so similar to this, this was a way to advertise like this lip balm brand, which on paper would seem completely tangential and unrelated to Mariah Carey, to Roblox, or into Web3 in general. But they found a way to provide more value in the game by using the brand of EOS, which is the chapstick brand. And so this is one way that that Relentlo worked to tie a connection between the kind of the traditional consumer, like tangible product market, with Web3.
Well,
I've got another question, if that's okay.
yeah, go for it.
1 second. I'm just pulling it up. Um, oh, let me. This is the most skeptical question I've I've seen all week. Are you ready? So I'm just going to read the whole thing. It's not very long. I still don't understand this technology or its benefits for music industry professionals at all. From what I discovered last week, I still need to promote my music. I still have to worry about developments in this new technology. I have to participate actively in communities or organizations. I have to create NFTs and stuff like that as well. And unless I'm making music that's popular with Web3, like electronic music, then the chances of successful promotion are very low. So why should I bother?
Yeah, you're totally right. So basically,
Okay.
Web3 or blockchain technology, the benefits for industry are purely removing the needs of middlemen to facilitate transactions between a fan or consumer and an artist, right? The entire technology is basically the ability to trustlessly exchange value between two strangers on the internet that may not know each other, right, and have no credit history of each other whatsoever, and kind of facilitate transaction where you get item A and they get like basically the funds that they ask for, right? That's all the technology really does. The other thing that technology does is basically enable digital ownership to exist in the first place, right? We've never had a way to truly digitally own something. So what does that mean? What is this whole like long spiel about ownership? All it means is before, for example, let's say if on WhatsApp, right, you have these like stickers, right, that you can buy. Those stickers and who owns them are purely tracked on the WhatsApp centralized database that WhatsApp owns. So if you would move to a different messaging platform, you don't necessarily have those digital stickers there, right? And so you only own those on WhatsApp. Now, let's take a step back and say, hey, what if those were actually digital sticker NFTs? Well, now if they were digital sticker NFTs, any application that's built on Ethereum could have access to the tokens that you own. And so they could integrate it into their application. And so what that creates is kind of this world where you're moving around with your digital items that you own into the different apps that you interact with, right? And so that makes digital ownership just a little bit more real, because analogous to physical ownership, if I own a physical item, like, I don't know, this set of headphones here, I can go to eBay, I can go to Amazon or any other marketplace like Craigslist or something to like buy or sell it. And that's my choice, right? I'm not only bound to the limits of maybe the place I bought the headphones to like go and resell them. So that's basically all the technology really does and can be leveraged for. You as an artist, though, art kind of like, it's not like a it's not like a utopia, right? Like you're not gonna ever kind of replace the need for self-promotion or like selling your stuff in terms of in terms of like succeeding in music in general. So yeah, I mean, you're right. This is a great question. There's a
What
lot,
about
there's always so much to juggle as an artist. It's not easy.
what about the concluding part of that question about styles or genres? Do you think it's possible to create meaningful promotion or a healthy community if you don't make electronic music?
Based on my experience, I want to say yes, 100%. Like basically, one of my friends, which I brought up last lecture, his like tag name on Spotify is like Shaq Stizzy, right? He makes music that's like totally different to like all the or like electronic music or music that might be a little more popularly minted like on chain, I guess, right? And basically with no promotion, like barely trying, right? We got his NFT up on Catalog Marketplace, and I think it literally sold within a month for like 0.15 ETH from an investor, from like a collector that just ended up liking his work, that just wanted to collect it. And he did that again with a different song, right? And yeah, I've also seen songs from different genres as well as languages be sold on these places. So I don't really think that it's kind of bound to like any single genre. It's kind of like me saying a similar thing would be like, oh, like the only music that succeeds on Spotify is like hip hop music. And it's like, yeah, it might be popular, right? But also there's a ton of other music that succeeds on Spotify that's not hip hop.
And something as well is that a lot of the times, I mean, this is the NFT marketplace that we're working with. And in a marketplace, you need a buyer and a seller to agree upon. I mean, they need to have a product and a price, and need to be able to agree upon an exchange of transactions here, like to transact, and this is essentially an exchange of goods and services. And so at the moment, we might see a larger concentration of EDM artists or musicians or fanatics who are interacting with Web3 at the moment. But as we've seen, when Web3 is starting to skyrocket in terms of popularity, in terms of overall network usage, congestion, and interest. And so as time moves on, we'll see more and more, let's say, like jazz fans who might want to buy NFTs, or might have, I mean, more aficionados of other genres that with time will start to interact more with the Web3 NFT marketplaces that currently exist. And so just because there is a larger population of EDM fans, it doesn't mean that this is the only type of popular music that will sell, or the only type of NFTs that will sell on Catalog or on a Web3 solution.
Great. I'd love to take more questions if there are any
Sure.
from the
but,
class.
yeah, I've got questions. One was about streaming in particular. 1 second. And the question was, I've just got them arranged thematically. If it was possible not to sell NFTs, but to stream them, how might Web3 gain some type of control over streaming in that environment? What might streaming look like in Web3? Because that's obviously a question connected to copyright and to payments and to what happens when you step away from a centralized organization like Spotify and you try and find some type of common laws within a decentered organization.
Yeah, really interesting question. So I guess to answer this, okay, so basically to answer this, like how streaming really works is like you basically have these premium paying subscribers who pay $10 a month, right? And then you have advertisers that are paying as well to get their ad played every like 5 songs or some amount like that, right? And so that's really where the money is coming from. That allows us to fund the platform offering the streaming of the music, as well as the artists like paying out royalty rights. So I guess like how would it exist in Web3? Well, the only thing really that the technology can do is again just facilitate transactions in a different way without requiring a middleman to basically handle that, like payment processing. And so if you kind of made like a Web3 version of Spotify, the only difference would be like instead of on Spotify's server kind of like handling the facilitation of paying royalty rights between like artists and advertisers and all of that, you would instead just have it like go directly from fan to artist. And so like just like digging deeper, it's like imagine if like every time you click play on a song, you had to like sign a MetaMask transaction for like 1 cent or something like that to play it, that'd be like really annoying as a user, right? And so basically a company like Audius, for example, or what streaming protocols that have tried to do this idea before of like Web3 streaming, what they really do is they instead like, hey, we'll compile kind of like all the songs that you listen to, and then we'll take whatever like monthly fee it is, and then basically try to split up that amount at the end of a month, so then you can just sign one transaction, right? I do, however, think that that basically like making a Web3 streaming platform from a first principles standpoint doesn't really make much sense, right? Like you're not really leveraging the technology to do anything different from what we had before, right? And so I think it makes a lot more sense to basically, like, if you wanted to start a streaming platform that fixes the streaming model or problem, what you would have to do is basically start a platform that doesn't give a fifth of its platform away to the big three record labels, instead focuses on independent artists, right? And basically sourcing advertisers. So it would be a platform like YouTube, but for music, right? YouTube is the most successful creator business model that's ever existed. It's the only place where there exists a middle class for creators. It's the only place where you can have like 10 to 15,000 subscribers, for example, and make a living off your work. And the reason they can do that is because they have a very great relationship with millions of like advertisers, right? And they are constantly balancing that with a relationship with creators and the basically leaving enough freedom for what you can create. And yeah, basically, and then also giving viewers the best possible playback experience on our platform, right? So the funny thing about YouTube is like all the content is free, right? They do have YouTube Premium now for $9.99 a month, but the overwhelming majority of everyone who uses YouTube is using the free version, yet they compensate creators the best. And so I think like if you wanted to fix this streaming model, it has nothing to do with kind of applying blockchain as a solution, trying to find like a problem, right? It's more kind of like, hey, let's basically focus on the right things, which is independent artists that basically like not trying to like just come up with a platform, already have 100 million songs on your platform, but instead like bootstrap it with the artists who actually need it. And then basically, hey, what advertisers are interested in placing ads like on this type of work, and then how can I provide viewers with the best playback experience possible? If you get those three right, then you have a great streaming platform. I don't think it has anything to do with like basically putting blockchain here.
Great. I've got 3 more copyright questions. Is it possible to publish your work anonymously and preserve copyright at the same time? For example, how could Banksy prove his copyright if he were a musician, or in fact, even if he isn't a musician? How would a visual artist upload their work to Web3 and still preserve their copyright? Is it technically possible? Question. That's
Yeah, of
me
course.
quoting. Yeah.
Yeah, and this links back to, I mean, exactly. Look, let's use Banksy for the example. Well, we know which work has characteristics of being Banksy, and we don't know who Banksy is, but we know the name Banksy as the representation of the owner and the creator of this work. In the same way, like you can have, just like I mentioned earlier, you can have a wallet address that may not be linked to a certain name, or it may fall under a pseudonym, and due to the pseudonymous structure where where each piece of artwork or music will have a link to an address, but that address will not necessarily be linked to a real life identity. You can link everything to a pseudonym for an address or an address itself without ever making a connection to the real person. And then that way you can still enforce the same copyright structures and can do so by very clearly proving that this wallet address has taken steps to that and to protect or want to infringe any copyright or protect against any copyright that may come from that may exist in this scenario.
Yeah, I do want to add that basically, if by copyright enforcement you mean if someone else went and minted an NFT like with your work, that they could be sued, or it'll be enforced somehow by taking down an NFT or something like that. That basically can't happen. Like, once anybody, like basically anybody who makes an account on Ethereum, which is like anybody could do that. You don't really need permission to make an account on Ethereum. No one's tracking it. Can go ahead and mint an NFT with any piece of content that they want, right? And so there's really no way to basically enforce or take things down. The only thing you can really do is basically, as an artist, if you're minting an NFT, you go on your Twitter and you're like, hey, I just like minted this NFT. This is the like address of the NFT. This is my address. Any other NFT that was minted with a different address is not legit. It's inauthentic. It wasn't me. So basically just don't look at it. And so you gain the social consensus of the people that matter, which are your collectors and fans. And they know exactly the correct place to like go to. However, like there's no way to like enforce anything that happens like on chain besides that.
So yeah, I think basically, even on a very fundamental level, the question was, is it possible to create a legal document that does not contain your name on Web3?
I mean,
is your identity expressed by the wallet address, or is it expressed by your actual name? So if you're trying to publish something that, let's say, is dangerous to publish, can you do that and even collect funds but not mention your name? Or maybe just for artistic reasons, you think it's more interesting if people don't know your name. Can you create a copyright document?
So I guess like there's two parts to this question. It's, can your identity remain anonymous on chain? 100%, right? Your identity is only represented by your public address on chain, right? And that could, you don't have to tie that to any like real identity at all, right? So I think you're muted.
Yeah, I was, sorry. And just to clarify for everybody, so by address, you don't mean street address, you mean actually the public address. That that represents your wallet.
Exactly. Your public, like public key wallet address. So that's, so for first thing about identity, 100%, you can remain like anonymous. No one really needs to know. In terms of like putting a copyright document on chain, like the reason that's like really confusing is because there's basically no way to enforce anything that happens on chain, right? Because it's like kind of like purely digital world, and it's permissionless, which is kind of a buzzword, but it just means that like if I wanted to mint an NFT, I don't have to ask any organization for permission. I can just go and mint the NFT. And so, yeah, pretty much in terms of putting a copyright document on chain, I don't think it makes much sense, right? Because you need a legal authority to enforce that copyright document. And so basically, like, you could put it up there. Just know that in terms of enforcement, there isn't really much that anybody can do, because anybody can mint an NFT, and once they mint it, like we saw with those Justin Bieber NFTs, it's gonna stay up there forever. So the most that platforms can do is like, oh, okay, we'll just hide this from the front end of our platform. Does not mean that like it's not gonna still be on chain. Like it'll still be on the blockchain permanently. I hope that makes sense.
It does. I have one final question at the moment about copyright. What if somebody, just making sure I'm not muted this time, what if somebody to protect the exposure or complete publication of a work, what if they just want to publish part of an NFT, like a preview or a modified version, and then after the purchase of this demo version, for example, somebody then gets the whole NFT? I imagine you've seen examples of that.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. OpenSea has a new feature where you can actually mint NFTs that allow access to exclusive content. So it's basically exactly what you're saying. You can kind of set it up so you have a preview of your work, and then basically sell unlockable content. So yeah, you could do that. And I'm pretty sure the content that you're allowing access to would either be like manually sent or encrypted via the via some key. I think it's probably unlockable by the condition that the owner owns the NFT.
Do you want another question? I have one more that's just appeared.
Yeah, sure. Are these questions coming from a class, by the way?
Yeah, no, yeah, it's not me. I'm not, it's not, this isn't me in a cup of coffee. I'm not just making stuff up. Yeah, I'm people are sending questions. People are sending questions. Yeah, maybe there's nobody in the class. Everyone's gone home. These aren't avatars. These are just pictures of non-existent people, and I'm making up questions.
I mean,
If
in
you
the
want to
wild
hang out with-
west of Web3 music, that totally could be true.
Yeah, Dave,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, maybe nobody is here. Maybe
if you
they're
want to hang
all-
out with us, just say so. We can.
Okay.
We have time.
Okay. Let's have a look. So I'm translating all of these as I go. Is it possible to what's a good word? Is it possible to construct the streaming of music on Web3 in the same way as a torrent works? So, piece by piece by piece, and all the files are located with different people all at once. Has anybody suggested a solution to the monetizing of Web3 streaming that is, from an engineering standpoint, similar to a torrent?
Yeah, I would say I want to dissect the question a little bit. Basically, in terms of peer-to-peer file sharing, I think what decentralized storage, what blockchain really is a technology. It's a peer-to-peer network, right? And so it's obviously very similar in terms of like first principles to a peer-to-peer file sharing network, right? The only difference here is in a peer-to-peer file sharing network, you're focused on exchanging information, whereas in like a peer-to-peer blockchain network, you're more so focused on exchanging value and storing value, right? I think in terms of the Web3 streaming solution, again, like we answered in a previous question, I don't really think blockchain makes that much sense as a use case for like a streaming platform. And the reason is because you always are met with this dilemma of like, you need to handle microtransactions, right? And then it's like, if you do need to handle microtransactions, how much is each stream worth, right? And so let's say we pull back and we're like, oh, maybe the artist should decide their own streaming rate. And it's like, great, they should. All right, but now as a consumer of this music, imagine me being like, I want to play this song, or like I'm listening to music while I'm working, and basically every time a new song comes on, I have to sign a transaction of some varying amount. And it's like, oh, $1 to stream this one. Oh, there we go. Sign this. Go back to working. Come back. It's like, oh, my music isn't playing anymore. Oh, this guy wants $50 to stream his song. All right, great. So I'm not it's like that's never gonna happen, right? And so yeah, basically, so let's say we didn't do that, then how do we decide how much each one of these transactions is going to be worth if we don't have some sort of like monthly amount that's like divvied up between people? And it's like it's really hard to decide that amount. It's very hard to facilitate those microtransactions while not compromising the user experience. So basically, I just don't see it making much sense. If someone in a class is like super interested in a Web3 streaming protocol, prove me wrong. Like I like, basically go out and be like, no, there's like a good way to do this. I think right now I haven't seen one though.
But it's possible here to draw a parallel, let's say, with, the internet, I don't know, 30 years ago. So before streaming service, well, before the technology was there, you would have a multitude of independent, unconnected music platforms that would all be charging different rates, right? And then gradually they were all consolidated and everybody, well, it's not that everybody agreed on the same rate, but that one central organization, Spotify, Apple Music, Google Play, whatever, Tidal, they would dictate the rates. So does it just seem from an evolutionary point of view logical that different genres will create different communities with mini streaming services, and each of those services will have a different rate?
I mean, maybe. Yeah, I mean, maybe. I think like even if that were to happen, I guess like you would kind of need a justification for why it makes sense to leverage like blockchain technology specifically to facilitate those transactions. Because like, for example, like we can spin up a streaming platform right now for this class, technically, right? Whether or not we have to use blockchain is like a totally different question. And it's like we don't really need to use blockchain to like make that happen, right? So it's like we kind of need a justification for like why blockchain.
Well, the primary justification would be, this is what you mentioned right at the beginning, is that Web3 removes the middleman, right? So it removes Spotify. So Spotify is no longer paying you pennies. Or if you go back 10, 15, 20 years, it would remove an organization like iTunes. So, what was it, 99 cents iTunes used to charge for downloads. And I think Apple took a third of that. I seem to remember 33%. So you're removing all of that. So immediately there's a financial benefit. So whatever you charge, even if it's only, a penny a stream, that's going to give the musician significantly more income than a large organization would. The problem, of course, is that you can create this beautiful, democratic, small community, but maybe nobody knows where it is. Maybe nobody will come to it. So then why would anybody come to your small streaming platform with a tiny library and not go to Spotify? And personally, I think one of the big growth areas here is for music scenes that are not in English, because the English language predominates, doesn't it, within those large organizations. So if you already exist, it's a terrible phrase, but let's say you speak a minor language. So if you speak a smaller or minor language, if you play a genre that is already unpopular, that is already a niche style, those are the people that I think would gain more from Web3, because the libraries of Spotify and Apple Music are so enormous that nobody will ever find you. So you don't have anything to lose by stepping away from those organizations. Would you agree with that?
I mean, yeah, I would totally agree with that. I think that we kind of went over like a lot of different things in terms of like leveraging blockchain to remove the middleman in these transactions for this like community streaming protocol that's maybe focused on, like you said, different languages than English or a smaller community of people. So the thing is, you can also just make a streaming platform that just doesn't take a ridiculous fee. Like that's just up to your business model, right? And so like I could basically just host a streaming platform right now, and I could just be like, oh, I'm not going to take a fee, right? Obviously there's costs associated with like keeping up a server and like all that type of stuff. So yeah, I think in terms of leveraging blockchain to facilitate this, the only thing I really see here is if you made some sort of open source streaming platform that anybody could fork and put up on their own. That way you're basically removing like censorship, for example, because anybody could like put up their own version of a platform. So yeah, I mean, I don't want to sound like I'm a totally like pessimist with like blockchain technology. Like that's not the purpose here. I guess the purpose is to like really just demonstrate to the class that like you should think critically about like why your solution or platform really needs to leverage blockchain technology. Because if there isn't a really good answer for that, then there's no reason that you should go through the hassle of using this like usually very like expensive distributed system and networking way of doing things when you can do things a lot more efficiently and consolidated with a centralized server, right? And there's like only very specific use cases where it absolutely makes sense to use like blockchain, for example, right? Yeah, and then I think the idea of like basically having these like sub streaming platforms or pages is really cool. Pretty much like one idea that I'm working on right now is I'll leave it unnamed because I don't know if I put it out yet. But basically the idea is leveraging one of one NFTs as membership passes to offer like exclusive experiences for a specific artist. And so like one example of this could be like a really cool digital experience. Imagine if you owned kind of this like membership pass for an artist, and this pass gave you access to that artist's like streaming platform, right? I imagine that could be pretty cool. Like if an artist put up their own site that has their own rules or whatever, for their own version of Spotify, that's basically like gated to this like sub community. And so, I mean, I really like that idea. And yeah, I think if I were to put up a streaming platform like this, for technical reasons and implementation, ease of implementation, probably wouldn't put it up on like a blockchain network, for example. But yeah.
One more question about the law and copyright and so on. If we're talking about a decentered network, then it will logically, not inevitably, but probably as it grows, work across different jurisdictions, different legal systems in different countries. Which takes precedence? How does somebody know which copyright laws apply to that network if it doesn't belong to one place, if it doesn't have a geographic address?
I guess the short answer is they don't. Like there's really no enforceable copyright laws or regulations that exist on any blockchain network. Which is why like going back to this like Creative Commons Zero license, the Creative Commons Zero license is basic. I'm pretty sure it's like literally like the lowest, like the lowest tier of like a Creative Commons license that you can have, which like it basically grants everybody, it grants people the right to publicly use the work that you published commercial in any way they want. That's like what the Creative Commons Zero license is.
But that raises an interesting question, whether, let's say, a Web3 community could register itself legally as a non-profit, for example, in a particular country, and therefore the smart contracts would all refer to that physical location.
Yeah. I guess, I mean, I think that'd be a pretty like cool concept or idea. I haven't seen that obviously been done yet. Of course, I think, like, let's say if you did register a Web3 network into a certain location, like obviously you might want some way to kind of like gate it from from people who live in different locations on the internet, possibly. Um,
Because, if somebody, so let's say I'm part of a community, and I'm in Los Angeles, somebody's in Venezuela, somebody else is in Australia, and all three of us are writing smart contracts. To which legal system does that smart contract apply? Mine, or the Venezuelan one, or the Australian one, or all three?
so I think like if you're if you're asking about, I mean, Nate, if you want to chime in here.
Yeah, so that's part of the challenge is that when you're working across the world with a bunch of different organizations, different regulatory parties, different even just understandings of music and how it could be regulated, it's difficult to create a parallel that lines up with all of these different parties. And so as when kind of the new direction that we see the space going is a kind of Web3 standard for how music is copyrighted and regulated that's agreed upon and voted upon by different network participants. And so what this does is one, it tries to take like a cross-sectional approach and encourage everyone who has a stake or who is involved in in Web3 music to get to vote and actually maybe put down a token or essentially find a way to vote and agree upon a standard for how music is regulated. And so we haven't gotten to this point yet where we've established those guidelines. I mean, just like with any other protocol, we have improvement protocols or I guess we have like improvement like proposals that can be passed that could help to develop these standards. But right now we haven't created, I don't think there is, I mean, Mo, correct me if I'm wrong, a current like standardized music governing or even media governing blockchain, so to speak. And so once this is established, then we'll start to develop guidelines that lay out how copyright works in Web3, how sharing, media replication, all these components that we're talking about. And so that's when I foresee Web3 approaching a much more much more steady horizon in the sense that they're clearly laid out guidelines and an understanding for how we should work with media.
Right. So yeah, basically leveraging this like more democratic way of doing things to define like to create standardization and define guidelines on behalf of a global community of people.
That's the end of my questions for the moment.
Great. I was also going to talk about, I guess like we covered a lot just through these questions too, but I was going to talk about some of like the scams or frauds that could exist, which I guess we've kind of already covered. Let me just go
I was
through
muted.
yeah, wait, what were you gonna say?
Sorry, I was muted. Do you
Oh.
have some specific examples of scams or frauds? Just some of the dangers?
Yeah, I mean, there's actually so many that have happened. So like let's just pull someone up. Nah. I need to know a name. Let's see. So there's been a ton of these like 10,000 profile picture projects where it's just I'm trying to get the project name. Kind of forgot it.
And then while Mo's doing this, I'm going to point out in the last like 10 to 15 minutes, I'm going to open up breakout rooms. And so as you see on the document, we'll have breakout rooms, which are smaller rooms that will correspond with your project groups. So we'll give you a few minutes at the end of this lecture to meet and talk with your group and then make a plan for getting communication and having your project ready by Friday. So please stick around for that at the end.
And I should say, I mentioned this to Nate at the beginning. So the presentations will be in English, but if anybody needs any help with the English, I'm not going to influence the content of your presentation. But if you just want me to look at it, even from a stylistic point of view, or maybe if nobody in the group is very comfortable with English, I'm happy to translate it. So, you know, lean on me as well, and together, not at the very last minute. So not 10 minutes before you present, but, you know, give me a day or two to make it sound good, and I'll be happy to make sure that you're confident when one of your group members reads it out. Or if you have time, you could even turn the presentation into a song and just, you know, you could sing it.
Yeah, so it's low-key it's pretty, so it's kind of hard to find the actual project name, which is what I was looking for, but I'm just going to use this as an example. So this project was a project that looks very similar to something like the Bored Ape Yacht Club project. So Bored Ape Yacht Club project was one of the first really popular profile picture projects where 10,000 NFTs were minted, and the pictures that the NFTs were linked to were basically automatically generated based on these like different attributes or properties. So you can see here that there's like 8 different backgrounds. There's like different clothes that these characters could wear, like earrings, fur, etc. Right?
But we
Like all
went
these
sharing
attributes. Oh, I'm not sharing screen.
No,
Thank you. Sorry, so now you can see what I'm talking about. Basically this is called the Bored Ape Yacht Club. Is one of the first like really popular projects, like I said, with 10,000 NFTs minted. And you can see they're kind of like trading cards, and all these different attributes like the background, the clothes, and all these types of things were basically like automatically generated and randomly generated. And so some of these attributes are like more rare to find within this collection of 10,000 characters than other like attributes, I guess, right? So basically based on that rarity, collectors will try to like collect and trade up to like the rarest, I guess, like character or card. And so because this project gained a ton of success, a lot of people, and by a lot I mean like literally everyone and their mothers like in this space was coming out with like the same concept, these like 10,000 characters and like different rarities. And so a really common scam to see is basically a project that's trying to like do this, but like let's say instead of like apes it's like something else, right? So what this article is talking about is basically this project with that's supposed to have like 3 women behind it, and it's kind of like Bored Ape Yacht Club, but more so for like empowering women, and that was like the entire like concept of it. And basically what happened was, as you see here, you have this team of 3 people that remain completely anonymous, right? And so what they did was they put out this project. They basically sold it and the promise of it to all these different people. And once they, you know, gained a certain amount of demand, they sold out the project for $1.5 million in total for like every token. And then they just disappeared because no one knows who they are, right? And they remain completely anonymous. And so once they disappeared, like basically like something else that's common is, I want to find like a good one, is for these NFT projects, they often kind of like put up some sort of like what is it called, roadmap for their project. And so they basically promise that like, okay, we're going to drop this 10,000 collection. After we drop this, we're gonna use all the funds and donate it to, I don't know if it's like a really good cause or to purchase land in the metaverse. After that, we're gonna pay developers to create skins, for the metaverse, etc. Like all these different things. And then, oh, we're gonna host like this community event that everyone's gonna come out to. And so you promise all these things that are gonna happen after you mint out your project, but what you do is like what these scammers do is they remain anonymous and basically put this stuff out, promise all this stuff that they're going to do with your money, and then they never deliver on that promise. They just disappear. And so that's what's called like a rug pull, which is basically like a really common scam in the NFT space to be aware of.
Actually, would you just want to explain in English what a rug pull is? I can do it.
Well, okay, like I guess
I literally read the word. Oh, there you are. Great. That's exactly what we want. Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, I mean, I would say like a rug pull is basically what I just explained. It's kind of like you promise all these different things that your project is going to accomplish, and you promise people that they're going to make a ton of money if they're early on your project, and then you just disappear out of nowhere. You're just like, all right, I'm just gonna basically take this money and I'm gonna run away with it, and you're never gonna see me again.
And so in crypto, this typically takes the form of a blockchain product and a lot of investors or users putting in a ton of money, or that's either like pumping in a ton of tokens or creating a lot of value in a project. And then the creators or the users or whoever has control over the project will then run away with the funds. So I believe that's the same as a Ponzi. I always confuse Ponzi and pyramid. I believe it's like it's one of those two. But
Ponzi and pyramid are basically the same thing.
it's the same. Okay.
Yeah, I think the difference there is I'm pretty sure like a Ponzi or pyramid scheme is when what you're selling is like teaching the thing that you're selling, if that makes sense. But it's like, hey, David, basically my project is what we'll do is we'll teach you how to make money by teaching people about Web3 and music. And basically to learn what you have to teach, you have to pay me like $50. And then for you to go out, like basically what you're learning is how to go out and sell how to teach Web3 music. And it's just like a pyramid scheme, right?
And then a lot of Bitcoin skeptics think of Bitcoin as a Ponzi scheme because as more users come, I mean, if you imagine the structure, if you have a pyramid, you have the creator of Bitcoin, Satoshi Nakamoto at the beginning, then you have early investors, which is the second layer down. And as you work your way further and further, the lower, I mean, some argue that the lower levels are the newest investors pay out the oldest ones, the ones that have been around the longest. And so once you've built this further, like this bottom layer of investment, then you'll have the bubble burst. And that's when the whole structure collapses.
Yeah, it is important to note though that like every currency works like this. So you could just say that every currency is a pyramid scheme as well. Cool.
Do you think there's a growing wisdom in the community and people are becoming less susceptible to scams?
I think so. I definitely think so. I mean, just seeing, I spent some time working in venture capital and specifically looking at crypto and blockchain startups. And so something that I've noticed over about 3 years is that at the beginning of my time exploring these types of companies, like the teams that made a lot of money were ones that could add even just a blockchain buzzword or a very simple, somewhat unrelated blockchain use case to their non-blockchain company. And this can make a bunch of money, even if you have even throwing in the terminology of like an initial coin offering versus initial public offering. So initial coin offering is the first time that a token or a coin becomes public available to the public to buy, versus with an IPO, it's when a company will go public and then start to sell shares of the stock. And so throwing in that terminology in the same way that like back in 2000, you have pets.com, or you have all these .com startups that really relied upon the internet name to allow them to raise funds and then develop a case. And a lot of the times these companies didn't make it through like economic turmoil. And so we're seeing the same thing now with the crypto winter and our bear market of blockchain. The companies that have solid teams and underlying infrastructure are the ones that are starting to gain more traction and become maybe not quite profitable, but become sustainable. And so because of this, these are the companies that are gaining more traction, and people are looking at these ones also because the world tends to be more knowledgeable now versus 5 to 10 years ago. And so even having this time for people to learn more about the space, it becomes a lot easier to identify these potential scams. And so, I mean, of course, this is not a blanket statement. This applies to people who have had a chance to explore the space, and anyone who may be newer to it may still be susceptible to these types of scams. But now there are more data points available on viable blockchain use cases. And then one other point I also wanted to bring up to tie it back to what Mo said about the Bored Ape Yacht Club. We mentioned a lot how you can tokenize individual songs or lyrics or pieces of art that an artist may produce. But we didn't really talk as much until Mo brought this up about like tokenizing an artist themselves. And so we've been pulling up that other page you showed with the 3 women who had their own, here it is. So this is a great example of how not only did they brand their music, but these 3 women branded themselves and were able to create NFTs in themselves to provide value and then create buzz around their names themselves. And so that's another way that you can push your thinking about how you might want to promote yourself online. It's not always just the music, it could be around yourself. And so one other point that I thought of as well, that Mo kind of reminded me of, is the idea of the metaverse. And so there is a lot of space. There still is a lot of development that we'll see from the metaverse, but there are a lot of opportunities to promote kind of like live music, live concerts, like I mentioned with Relentlo, with the other startup, but also even advertisements and community engagement. And so I definitely recommend checking out metaverse like options for promoting music as an artist.
So that the second thing is something we haven't really spoken about. So how would somebody promote their music in the metaverse?
Yeah, well, Mo, do you want to give a demo of have you worked with the metaverse that much? I haven't that much, but I can talk about it a little bit.
Yeah, I haven't worked with the metaverse as much either, but I guess how you would go about promoting your music in the metaverse is basically the same as how you would promote your music like I guess regularly right now. You just leverage social media channels where people who are interested in the metaverse tend to be, and that tends to be like Twitter. It tends to be actually Telegram. There's a lot of people like try to DM you on Telegram to promote their projects and stuff like that. And yeah, even maybe like starting your own Discord or like artist account or whatever, and then trying to like engage community in that sense. But it would be like I said, very similar to just creating leveraging the existing channels and promoting your work.
So the solution that the metaverse tries to solve is that, well, in a scenario that in this scenario right now, we have people interacting all across the world with one another. And so the metaverse, as we've seen other examples when we think of like online platforms, games, like I believe even Second Life, all of these other platforms are ways for people to interact, chat with one another, maybe play online games together, but just communicate in a somewhat real-time scenario. And so that's what Decentraland, which is I believe it's the largest metaverse to date, but it's definitely it's one of the big names in the metaverse, or in one of the big metaverse names for people to interact using this distributed technology. And so using blockchain to do so without running on a centralized server. And so that's the big appeal that it has, but it also draws towards, or like the metaverse draws from people who are more Web3 inclined. And so it encourages those who want to, let's see, who typically use Web3 more often to use its platform and then to interact with other people on the platform. And
Yeah,
so
like this dude, who knows where this guy is?
I think you can optimize video too if you go to options, and then you go to optimize for video, and then it'll, because it's lagging a bit, Mo.
Oh, it's lagging on my end too.
Okay.
I think it's just like they have this like Mac desktop app that you can download, and then they also have a browser version. And I think when you're in the browser, it's probably a little less smooth. But I mean, this is pretty cool, right? This is literally a game that's running, like you were talking about, David, like peer-to-peer networks like Napster or Pirates Bay. Like this game basically runs on a peer-to-peer network. So it's like, yeah. Cool. Well, that's all the material that I have for the day. We kind of went over the existing problems that exist in the Web3 space. We talked about the lack of copyright arbitration and enforcement in this space, and to look out if you do have like any IP that you maybe want protected or that type of thing. Currently, the best solution for protecting it is basically gaining social consensus of what the authentic token is through your own channels in terms of marketing and that type of stuff. We briefly went over what like streaming protocols could look like in Web3, why it may not be a great idea to facilitate these microtransactions, as many times you're compromising the user experience, and then other times maybe it's just really hard to pick a rate that like makes sense. The large potential for fraud and scams in this space, and then yeah, that's basically it. And also kind of like what tends to succeed and doesn't succeed. We can talk more about that if you guys want, but that's basically everything.
Yeah, I'm muted again. I don't have any additional audience questions here. So did you want to maybe just break people up into rooms, and then we can make sure that every group is aware of its members?
Yeah, that sounds good. I'm going to stop the recording here for a second. Great. Well, welcome back, everyone. Thanks for joining. Hopefully you had some nice time to meet with your groups and plan out some details for later on. So if anyone has any questions, we will stick around, but that is most of what we had for today. So thank you so much for coming, and thanks for being with all your participation and meeting with your groups. Anything else, David, Mo, you'd like to add?
I'll just say very quickly, some people have asked, how are they going to defend their project? So all we're asking for is a brief 60-second presentation in front of everybody. So each group presents to all of us in 60 seconds to try and give a persuasive concept for how you might use Web3. If you have no ideas, I'll be happy to discuss them with you, and we can, troubleshoot together and find something that's interesting and useful to you specifically. But that's the basic mission. And this can be verbal, it can be visual. But as Nate said, if it's visual, we want people to just use one slide, that's all. And my personal recommendation would be, it's always very boring if you just read text from a slide. So try and, if you're going to use a visual tool, a single image, try and think of something that's very impactful, like a chart or a graphic, as opposed to just text. But once again, we have, 5 days to do this. I'm always here, so please don't be shy. Ask me any questions you want.
Great. I'm excited to hear all these wonderful ideas.
Okay. Thanks, everyone.